For most of my life, I had this belief that if one person gained, it always meant that the other person lost. And so this would translate into, let's say, if I had business endeavors, I was afraid that if I became wealthy, it would mean that other people had to become poor. I did not understand, and mostly because of my programming and conditioning. I mean, many of us have been conditioned into this belief system when it comes to just this idea of like how the economy works, right? We see a pie and basically that one pie is split up. So if one person gets a bigger piece of the pie, the other person gets a smaller piece of the pie. And so if you want to be somebody who I guess is quote unquote a good person, whatever that means, or generous, or you don't want to screw other people over, you become the type of individual who essentially is basically avoiding becoming wealthy at all. This is a subconscious thing. Like you may have the desire to build more to become wealthy, but you may hold the subconscious belief that if I become wealthy, if I make a substantial amount of money or have a substantial amount of resources and assets, I am going to take away from somebody who could at least have a little bit. And this idea is actually rooted in communism. That's the God honest truth. It is a communist idea that one man's gain means another man's loss. And unfortunately, many of us have bought into this narrative. And I wanted to just go through this short clip of none other than the man himself, Charlie Kirk, basically breaking this down in like a minute, little back and forth debate situation. And then I'm going to give my 2 cents. So let's get into it. FYI, right now, I am still figuring out my new setup. I'm figuring out lighting and things of that nature. So I apologize if the quality isn't the exact same, but again, I'm doing my best here. I'm going to make sure that I can get, a good streaming platform that I trust, where I basically just have to click one button and, we're off to the races. But for now, we're going to do it how we usually do it, which is right off the phone. So let's get into it.
And henceforth, we prove it again.
Okay.
In fact, some of these clothes are...
In this society, it does.
Just because someone gets rich doesn't mean someone gets poor.
Yes, it does.
Explain that to
In
me.
this society, it does.
Explain that to me. When you
someone
bought
gets
bought your hat, who got poor?
The people who made the hat.
They voluntarily contributed their labor and they got paid for it.
No, they did not.
They didn't?
There's workers in other countries who are enslaved to make things that I'm wearing right now.
Then why would you buy it?
Because there's no other options in our capitalist country. There are no other options in our capitalist country.
That's totally and factually incorrect. Make your own clothes.
There aren't very many options for that.
Well, so what you're...
I already got to stop this. If y'all are not familiar with the term virtue signaling, a simple breakdown to that is when an individual is looking to project themselves out into the world or have others perceive them as more virtuous than, essentially the rest of the people around them or whatever it may be. So this is clear virtue signaling. She's trying to grab for straws at this point, because why would she then end up damn near digging herself in that type of hole? That's the very first thing that came to mind when I saw this clip. I said to myself, now, wait a minute. She basically is admitting, even though she actually likely doesn't know where her clothes were made, right? She likely doesn't know the country. She likely hasn't even checked the tag. She just bought what she bought to have that little, yuppie hipster look. And essentially to, go to the rest of us and tell us how progressive she is because she buys her clothing from a thrift store, only to, I guess, admit that she is buying clothing made through slave labor, which, again, I don't know how she knows that exactly, but let's just get into this. Lord have mercy.
Well, so what you're trying to say is you outsource your goods and services in a capital voluntary because you don't want to spend the time to go make your own clothes. No, what I'm trying to say is you're making the argument for you. I don't make my own clothes because I'm happy that someone in Southeast Asia gets a job so that I don't have to go make my own clothes. I'm actually really happy about that. Restate your question. Restate the question.
And then they burn alive in factories for making your clothes?
I'm really happy that South.
And then they burn alive in... Okay. There is a reality to this, right? But the thing with reality is there are multiple realities. So you and I are living drastically different realities based upon a multitude of factors, right? Some of which include the decisions that we make, the beliefs that we hold, and where we choose to give our energy or to strip our energy and attention away from, right? Those things are contributing factors to our reality. So one person may very well be purchasing products that are made by, let's say, genuine slave labor. Then another individual is purchasing products that are made by individuals who are paid whatever you would consider a fair wage, right? So again, as I said, I learned my most valuable lessons being an entrepreneur, starting up and failing in businesses until I finally created something that was kind of working. That's how I learned. I mean, I've done everything from, digital marketing, which became kind of my niche, to trying to create a sort of luxury natural skincare product, right? Where we were sourcing directly from Ghana. I'll tell y'all the story one day, the entire thing. But essentially, I joined forces with an auntie of mine who had been in business for a while. She trusted me because I was, solid with my work ethic, etc. And long story short, we ended up going to Ghana and actually visiting the women who would go into these shea trees and, produce this natural shea butter, the shea nut, if you really want to get down into the real pronunciation of it. But we would get the shea nut, we would have the women produce it, we would pay them directly to produce it. Now, was it much cheaper than you would get anywhere else? First and foremost, would you even be able to get anywhere else, right? This was kind of an exclusive thing that was a part of their own culture. But even if you could get it somewhere else, yes, it was going to be cheaper, but cheaper meant something different for them. So putting money in their pocket allowed them to mobilize. And again, when you're running any business, you want to have obviously the best quality you can get, but you want the best prices so you can stay in business. Business is expensive. Even for those who seem to have these crazy high margins on products, etc., there's still somewhere the money is going. It's like software. You make it once and it's done. Not necessarily. Your biggest expense in a software company is going to be your engineers. That's an expense, and that's a very real expense. It's maybe going to be overhead or, different servers or whatever it may be. Things add up. And again, this was one of my most valuable lessons through business because first and foremost, I got to see how trade actually works in real time and how everybody benefits in that ecosystem. If I was just to point out one product here, one company makes, the acoustic here, one company makes the hardware, one does maybe the wiring or sells different separate wires. One does, the actual auxiliary cord. You have the truckers who are driving back and forth each of these products. You have the distributors, the salespeople making the calls. Like this is how an actual economy works. Now we have this idea that is just this evil, rich bastard who is just finessing and scamming people, right? But that's a small little window that we get in. It's really a Hollywood-esque type of image or what the news presents. The news shows it as, well, everybody who's rich is just a scumbag who scammed people, as opposed to what about the dude who made that pillow that you're laying on and became a multimillionaire, right? What about the publishing company that is printing these books? The individual selling, these custom-made mugs that has the potential to become a multimillionaire. The company that made this wasn't IKEA, but let's say it was, that was definitely an option before I got this table. That is a billionaire who owns that company, and people love him because how altruistic he is. But nevertheless, they're contributing to the ecosystem, and we trade value for value. So I'm gonna let this video play out. There's only like 20 seconds left, and I'm gonna get back in my spiel because this is something that is a passion for me to talk about, and I don't feel I talk about it enough. But it's truly unfortunate how miseducated we are when it comes to economics and how many people would deprive themselves or not even aspire towards things, not understanding that when you create something, you create a new pie. You're not taking somebody else's pie, right? You're creating something from nothing. So let's get into it.
I'm really happy that
Southeast Asia is experiencing economic renaissance, so I don't have to go make my own clothes. In fact, some of these clothes are made in Italy because they're quite expensive.
So you're happy that people burn alive in factories so you can buy your clothes for cheaper?
I think that's a wonderful thing.
Okay, you're happy that people burn alive in factories. That's what you just said. Thank you.
Thank you for your feeling-induced emotional argument, and henceforth, we prove it again.
Oh, Lord. Insufferable is the word. Those individuals are simply insufferable. Okay, yeah, I'm not even going to really take too much time as far as her own argument because there really was no argument there made, right? It's just an emotional appeal. She is looking to virtue signal, as I said. Hey, everybody, look at me. I am so conscious. I am so aware. I'm so woke to the reality of what's actually going on. And again, if she genuinely believed what she's saying, like he said, she would indeed create her own clothing. She would produce her own food. But instead, she blames, oh, but it's because I live in this capitalistic society. Here's the thing. If you're a genuine communist, socialist, whatever it may be, there are countries on this planet who are communistic, socialistic countries. They would gladly welcome you into their country and you can become, a resident of that nation. They would gladly take all the money that you produce or would otherwise produce and put it into their own coffers as, the governing body. They would gladly do that for you. So the fact that most of these so-called communists, I call them comment section communists and social media socialists, the fact that they never actually take a step into these countries, let alone move there for good, even though they really hold these Marxist values, shows me that they are full of shit. Simple as that. They are full of it. They are lying. They are benefiting from the capitalistic society and then whining about it in order to signal to the world that, again, they are this virtuoso of an individual. Oh, look at how oppressed I am, right? And I've noticed most of the conversation comes from the white liberals. I think it's because it's harder for them to get the other oppression brownie points. It's like they can't become, a woman of color or trans woman of color, whatever it is. So the closest they can get to it is to become an ally, quote unquote, to become like a climate activist or, just to hop on the what do they call it? The Occupy Wall Street or the remnants of the Occupy Wall Street. People talking about eat the rich, etc. So again, I'm a pro-capital guy. I'm a pro-free market capitalist because that's the best system. And we've seen that throughout. You go to countries abroad. When you see countries begin to become prosperous, it's because they put their free market first. Simple as that. We saw a complete shift within a country like Argentina, where they have a president who has been fixated on doing exactly that, right? My lady is from a specific place in Europe. I'll name it. It is in Belgium, right? Now, if you go in half of Belgium, you're going to see more of this socialistic mindset, and you see it is essentially the equivalent of a second world nation, right? A developing nation. You go into the other part of Belgium, infrastructure is built beautifully. You have, essential systems of people who are cleaning up the areas and things of that nature. Booming businesses. There are a multitude and a host of companies, small little businesses that are thriving. And that's because there is a mayor who made a decision that his city was going to be a free market capitalistic city. It's become a cuss word for some reason. Like we have been so conditioned to believe that capitalism is bad, not understanding that what we're actually perceiving is usually crony capitalism or a genuine oligarchy, which just means a small group, of individuals ruling over the masses. When you have no ability for, the quote unquote average person to build wealth. In this nation, you do have that. It would be disingenuous to say in these United States that you cannot actually become a multimillionaire or create, a substantial amount of wealth coming from nothing. It would be disingenuous because 70 to 80% of the wealth that is created is from individuals who did not have wealth to begin with. It's not the trust fund babies, etc. That's a very small group of individuals who actually become significantly wealthy. Most millionaires or multimillionaires or multi-billionaires are individuals who built that wealth through creating a service or through creating a product that other people traded value for value for. There are scammers in our society, but they exist at the lowest levels, right? The little credit card scammers to the Ponzi schemers like the Bernie Madoffs, etc. These individuals exist. But it will be actually more difficult for you to have a long-term sustainable business to create a substantial amount of wealth and do it generationally if you are a genuine scammer. A genuine scammer. Because at some point you'll get figured out and people won't want to do business with you because they don't trust you. The man Bernie Madoff, he not only ended up, essentially dying in jail, but he lost his entire family. Nobody even wanted the man's ashes, folks. He was such a smite on his family's name that one of his sons took his own life. The other one ended up, deathly ill. His wife ended up becoming homeless and destitute. And it wasn't because they lost their money. It was because they were so ashamed of what their father had been doing this entire time. Watch the documentary when you get a chance. A guy like this, very controversial figure, right? John D. Rockefeller. I said, instead of just making my assumptions, let me read the actual autobiography of this man. Let me read up on as much information. And, many things I didn't know. He was pro-abolitionist and put a lot of money into the abolitionist cause, even into the Underground Railroad. They had Sojourner Truth and individuals like that who were actually staying at their home, when he was young and things of that nature. So, there are things that I look at and I'm like, okay, he was extremely shrewd. He was extremely cutthroat how he did his business and how he, calculated numbers or whatever. He's obsessed with the finite details. But he still created essentially a monopoly of the oil industry, which again, we created anti-monopoly laws for a reason, because we want to create a more fair playing ground. However, the man built himself from nothing, from his first dollars, with a dad who was a finesser and tried to finesse him. And he realized he had to do it in a different way. A deeply religious man, right, who wasn't playing a lot of that stuff. Again, am I going to say that what his children and his children's children became was not something that was problematic? Some of them, yes. Some of them, no. Right? We have to be fair in these conversations. And I'm that guy. Like, if someone's corrupt, I'm going to call it exactly what it is. But I'm not just going to pin it to everybody because I'm feeling insecure or, I have beliefs that I'm holding on to. I look to create as much wealth as I'm here to create. Simple as that. I don't want any less, any more. Let me go ahead and get this. When your charger is plugged in, but it's not really plugged in, and so the whole time your thing is just burning up fuel? Yeah, that's what was going on. So I'm the type of guy who says, okay, if you do it the right way, you deserve to become as wealthy as you possibly can. If 1 billion people buy your product for $1 and you end up becoming a quote unquote billionaire, right? That would mean 100% profits. But, let's just theoretically say that you deserve to make that $1 billion, and it's going to contribute to the ecosystem. There are people that you're likely employing. There are, certain things that you're purchasing. Maybe you get a building for your employees to even be in. All of that is essentially part of the free market. It's trade and trade and trade and trade some more. You just go into the building itself. Like, you'll start to look at money different if you really look at it this way. The building by itself, just the door to be made was somebody who's getting paid. Just the knob to be made is somebody getting paid. Just the wood for the door, somebody getting paid. The metal for the knob, somebody getting paid. We haven't even gone through the door yet. You understand? You have now the bricklayers who are getting paid. You have the concrete manufacturer getting paid. You have the individuals doing the plaster or whatever it may be getting paid. The flooring people getting paid. Contractor getting paid. This is before we've even moved into the building. We now have a business that is operating within that building. This is how the true economy works. Now, most people say, well, what about charity, etc.? Charities do not exist without the entrepreneur. Charities don't exist without the quote unquote capitalist. Individuals who are creating profitable businesses are the ones who are putting a substantial amount of money into these, organizations. Individuals such as maybe a Rockefeller or a Carnegie or whatever it was. You can say it was either their ego and pride or whatever that led them to give 99% of their wealth, but they still did it. There are certain individuals who make that promise. And I don't believe it makes you a worse or a better person how much you gave. I'm not that type of guy, right? I'm not the guy who's going to shame somebody into using their money one way or another. You want to get a Lambo? That's on you. You want to give it a charity? That's on you. I'm not going to judge you. I'm not the one. I'm not here pretending like, I get $1 million in my hands. It's all going to charity. I don't lie to myself like that. I'm going to do my best to help the people around me and then see if I can do whatever it is. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend, because let's be real, a lot of folks like to pretend. You got $10 right now and you didn't give $5 of that, $5 of those dollars to the charity or the homeless or whatever. You held on to that 10 and you spent that 10. So it's going to probably be no different when you get $1 million. Let's just be, again, I'm not here with the cappery. I'm not here with the sugarcoating. These are the facts. So when you have a nonprofit or whatever it is 9 times out of 10 getting funded by individuals who have built a substantial amount of wealth. Just like our tax system. The rich need to pay their taxes. How about 41% of the taxes in the USA are paid by 1% of the population? 1%. 1% of the population pays 41% of our taxes. And if those individuals were to leave tomorrow because they're disincentivized, like what happened in California, the place starts to fall apart because there's no capital essentially moving. And then the next I guess like 30 or something percent is paid by then the middle to upper middle class, right? So when you start looking at the poorest of your population, and people like to think poverty is just a byproduct of corruption, etc. That's not inherently true. We can have a whole other conversation just about that one. But the bottom percent is paying, a few percentiles of that tax. So eat the rich, get rid of people who actually have a mentality to build wealth. You essentially get rid of your tax base. What happens then? Your country falls into destitute. Like the government is now scraping away at the poor, taking the little bits that they can, and likely, like a socialist environment, true socialism, which is essentially just a doorway to communism, they're collecting the money for themselves. They're collecting the money for themselves. At least in a capitalistic society, you have the option to trade amongst one another. There will always be greedy individuals. There will always be cronies. There will always be people who want to connect and work together and work with the government, do this and do that. It only becomes unfair when you now have a government who is incentivized by connecting with corporation. That's when you have the problems. What we see in pharma and some of these different spaces, right? That's when it's problematic. Or when the government is over-regulating businesses, or when the government is trying to get itself into bed with business, that's when you have problems. The further the government is from our business, essentially, literally our business, which is our everyday lives, as well as the corporations and the companies that we put together, the better off our economy actually is. When they start to meddle is usually when things start to go awry, right? They're just supposed to essentially create the playing ground and leave it the hell alone. So yeah, true free market capitalism is a beautiful thing. It is a gift. It's a reason why millions of people look to break into this country every single year. And at least 2 to 3 billion individuals want to be in a country like this. That's simple. There are no lines outside of communistic or socialistic countries. There aren't huge rows of people at the borderlines wishing and praying that they could get into that communistic society. There aren't. That's just the reality. And why is that? Because people leave those environments to get into a place where they can at least have the opportunity to fail or to succeed.
I used to be afraid of the dark, place unknown like a hardening heart. I used to see my life in the bar. Now the kids unchained, every shackle is lost. 2 steps in the moonlight, 2 step in the daytime. You just know when it feel right. You got a feeling the time's not. See you through those shades that I just threw on. Through my lenses, you just can't do no wrong. I fell in love with myself again. I fell in love with myself. I fell in love with the sunshine. I fell in love with the light. I fell in love with the full moon. I fell in love with the night. I can see the light again. I can see the light. You can see the life in him illuminate the night. I know the time is taking. A 365, that's a full rotation. I see you looking up, you know them constellations. Constantly gazing like house of praises, you get to praising. They see your light shine, that's